"I can't believe this is happening," Sophie Bennett whispered, though the words were barely loud enough to reach her own ears. Her fingers tightened around the worn leather straps of her tote bag, as if the bag itself could somehow hold her together. In front of her, on the conveyor belt of a neighborhood grocery store that smelled faintly of floor cleaner, bruised apples, and old coffee from the cashier's station, sat the only thing she had allowed herself to buy. 1 can of specialty baby formula, a small pack of diapers, 2 bananas with brown spots because they were cheaper, a loaf of bread from the clearance rack, a jar of baby food Lily usually accepted when her stomach was unsettled. Every item had been chosen after a calculation. Not a normal calculation, not the kind people made when deciding whether to buy the nicer coffee or the cheaper one, but the kind that left a person hollow. Sophie had stood in the aisle for 20 minutes, comparing labels while Lily fussed in the stroller, wondering whether she could risk the cheaper formula again. The last time she had tried, Lily had screamed for 3 hours and thrown up most of the bottle. So Sophie had picked the expensive can. Then she had put back the eggs, then the apples, then the toothpaste. The fluorescent lights overhead flickered faintly, turning everyone's face a little pale and tired. Sophie felt the line behind her growing impatient before anyone said a word. She could sense the small movements. A woman shifting her basket to the other hip, a man sighing through his nose, someone's phone screen lighting up as they checked the time. Lily kicked her little feet beneath the blanket in the stroller, her cheeks flushed from the cold November air outside, and from a low fever Sophie had been trying not to panic about all afternoon. "Come on, sweetheart," Sophie murmured, bending down to adjust the blanket around her daughter. "Just a few more minutes." The cashier, a young woman with tired eyes and a polite smile that had probably been stretched thin by a long shift, scanned the formula first. Beep. Sophie's stomach tightened. The diapers. Beep. The bananas. Beep. She already knew it would be close. She had counted the money twice before leaving the apartment. Once at the kitchen table under the yellow bulb that buzzed when the heat came on. Once again in the stairwell because she did not trust herself anymore. $18.27. That was what she had. The total appeared on the little screen. $22.85. For 1 second, Sophie simply stared at the numbers as if they might rearrange themselves. They did not. The cashier looked at her gently. "That'll be $22.85. Sophie opened her wallet anyway. It was an old wallet, the fake leather peeling at the edges. She pulled out the bills first, then the coins. Quarters, dimes, nickels, pennies. Her hands were trembling badly enough that 1 coin slipped and rolled toward the gum display. The man behind her made a quiet sound of irritation. Heat climbed up Sophie's neck. "I'm sorry," she whispered. She counted again, slower this time, because humiliation always seemed to demand an audience. $18.27. No hidden bill. No miracle dollar folded behind a receipt. No forgotten emergency 20. Just the late rent notice tucked into the back pocket of her wallet like an accusation. "I don't have enough," she said quietly. The cashier's face softened with discomfort. "I'm sorry, ma'am. I can take something off." Something. As if any of it had been extra. Sophie looked at the items on the belt. Bread could wait. Bananas could wait. Diapers could not. Formula could not. Not that formula. Not if she wanted Lily to keep it down tonight. Behind her, the line shifted again. A woman whispered, not quietly enough. "Why do people come shopping if they can't pay?" Sophie's face burned. She kept her eyes down because if she looked at anyone, she was afraid something inside her would break open right there between the candy bars and the card reader. "I'll put back the bread," she said. The cashier reached for it. Sophie stared at the total again. Still not enough. "And the bananas," she added, her throat tightening. Lily began to whimper, a small, weak sound that made Sophie's chest seize. The cashier removed the items. The total dropped, but not far enough. Sophie knew. Before the cashier said it. "You're still short," the young woman murmured. $3.12. $3.12. It was a ridiculous amount. Tiny. Almost nothing. Less than what some people tipped without thinking. Less than the cost of 1 coffee in the financial district where Sophie used to clean offices after everyone important had gone home. But in that moment, $3.12 might as well have been a locked door between her and her child's comfort. "I'll put the diapers back," Sophie said, though the words tasted like defeat. Lily coughed softly in the stroller. Not a normal cough. Sophie froze. It came again, small and wet, followed by a whimper. The cashier glanced down at the baby, then back at Sophie. The line behind her grew quiet in the way people grew quiet when suffering became too visible. Then a voice spoke behind her. Don't put anything back. It was calm, low, controlled, not loud, yet everyone heard it. Sophie turned slowly. A man stood behind her in a tailored navy suit, one hand resting lightly on the handle of a black leather briefcase. He was tall, perhaps in his late 30s or early 40s, with dark brown hair brushed back from a face that looked composed in a way money often taught people to look composed. His coat was open, his tie slightly loosened, and his gray eyes were fixed not on the cashier, not on the groceries, but on Sophie. Not with pity. That made it worse somehow. Pity was something she knew how to survive. She had practiced lowering her head beneath it. This was different. He looked as if he had recognized something. The cashier blinked. Sir, I'll cover it, he said, already pulling out his wallet. Sophie's embarrassment sharpened into instinctive resistance. No, please, you don't have to do that. I know I don't. He placed a bill on the counter. The cashier looked relieved enough that Sophie wanted to disappear. I can pay you back, Sophie said quickly, though she had no idea how. Today was, you don't need to explain. That was the kind of sentence people said when they had never needed to explain themselves to a landlord, a daycare worker, a utility company, or a pharmacist. Sophie lifted her chin slightly. Actually, I do. People always assume things when they don't know the explanation. Something shifted in his expression. Not offense. Something closer to recognition. You're right, he said quietly. I'm sorry. That surprised her enough to silence her. The cashier bagged the groceries. Sophie gathered them with stiff, careful movements, trying to preserve what remained of her dignity. Lily fussed again, cheeks flushed deeper now, her little fists pushing weakly against the blanket. The man noticed. Sophie hated that he noticed. Thank you, she said, barely above a breath. He nodded once. She pushed the stroller toward the automatic doors, cold air waiting on the other side, like another bill she had no way to pay. Outside, the November evening had turned wet. Not raining hard, but misting enough to slick the pavement and cling to Sophie's eyelashes. Cars hissed along the street. The bus stop was 4 blocks away. Her apartment was 15 blocks beyond that. Lily's daycare bag hung from the stroller handle, heavier than it should have been, stuffed with unpaid forms, a half-empty bottle, and the medication receipt Sophie had not been able to fill. She had taken 3 steps when she heard footsteps behind her. Sophie. She stopped, not because the man had followed her, because he knew her name. Slowly, she turned. The man stood several feet away, close enough to be heard, far enough not to crowd her. Rain silvered the shoulders of his expensive coat. Sophie's fingers tightened on the stroller handle. How do you know my name? His gaze flickered down briefly, then back up. The cashier said it when you used your rewards number. That was plausible. Too plausible. Still, Sophie stepped closer to the stroller. Thank you for the groceries. But I should go. Lily coughed again. This time, the sound was worse. Sophie bent immediately, pressing the back of her fingers to Lily's forehead. Too warm. Definitely too warm. Her mind began its terrible familiar math again. Urgent care copay. Bus fare. The prescription from last time. The unpaid pediatric bill. The landlord's note. Her phone buzzed in her coat pocket. She pulled it out with one hand. Daycare. Lily seemed feverish this afternoon. Please monitor. Also, reminder, balance due by Friday or care may be paused Monday. Sophie closed her eyes. The man's voice came softly. Is she sick? Sophie looked up at him, defensive before she even answered. She has a fever. Babies get fevers. Yes, he said. They do. But his eyes had gone distant for half a second, as though the word fever had opened a door he had tried to keep shut. I have a car nearby, he said. I can drive you home. Or to urgent care. No, the answer came instantly. He accepted it with a small nod. All right. That made her more unsettled than if he had argued. She started walking. The stroller wheels caught briefly in a crack in the sidewalk, and the grocery bag slipped from her wrist. The formula hit the wet pavement with a dull thud. Sophie stared at it. For one fragile second, she did not move. Then she crouched too quickly, dizzy from hunger and exhaustion, grabbing the can and wiping rainwater from the label with her sleeve. A car horn blared somewhere nearby. Lily began crying. The man stepped forward, then stopped himself. May I help with the bag? Sophie wanted to say no. She wanted to be the kind of woman who could say no to everything and still get home safely with her child and her groceries and her dignity intact. But Lily's cry was thin now. Tired. Wrong. Sophie handed him the bag. Just to the bus stop, she said. He took it carefully. Just to the bus stop. They walked side by side through the wet evening without speaking. Sophie kept one hand on the stroller and one hand near her phone. She was aware of him in the way poor women were aware of men who could change the air around them. His clothes, his shoes, the quiet confidence in his stride, the fact that people moved around him without realizing they were doing it. At the bus stop, the digital sign blinked. Next bus, 28 minutes. Sophie stared at it. Lily coughed again, then gagged. Panic cut cleanly through Sophie's pride. The man heard it too. I'm Ethan Westridge, he said. My car is across the street. You can take a photo of my license plate and send it to someone. You can sit in the back with your daughter. I won't ask questions. Sophie's breath caught. Westridge. The name struck some buried place in her memory, but she was too tired to locate it. You're used to making people feel safe with instructions, she said. A shadow crossed his face. No, I'm used to realizing too late that I didn't. The answer was strange enough to stay with her. Lily whimpered again. Sophie looked at the bus sign, then at the baby, then at the man. Her daughter's forehead was hot beneath her fingers. All right, she said. Urgent care. Not my apartment. Of course. She photographed his license plate. She texted it to Mara, her downstairs neighbor, along with, if I don't text in 20 minutes, call me. Mara replied immediately. Who is Ethan Westridge? Sophie typed, I don't know. Then she got into the car. The sedan was warm and smelled faintly of leather and cedar. Sophie sat in the back with Lily, refusing the front seat before Ethan could offer it. He did not comment. He turned the heat down when Sophie asked. He drove carefully, not fast enough to frighten her, not slow enough to seem indifferent. Lily dozed fitfully against Sophie's chest. For several minutes, only the soft rhythm of the windshield wipers filled the car. Then Ethan said, There's a pediatric urgent care on Delaney Street. It's open until 10. Sophie looked up sharply. How do you know that? My sister used to take her son there. Used to. His hands tightened slightly on the steering wheel. She died 3 years ago. The words were so quiet Sophie almost thought she had imagined them. I'm sorry, she said, because pain recognized pain even when trust was absent. He nodded once. Thank you. The silence changed after that. Not warmer, but less empty. At the urgent care clinic, the waiting room was crowded with tired parents, coughing children, and the stale smell of disinfectant. A television mounted in the corner played a cooking show no one watched. Sophie filled out forms with one hand while holding Lily with the other. Insurance information. Emergency contact. Employment status. She hesitated at that line. Former employer, Grayson Property Services. Current employer, none. Reason for visit. Fever, cough, vomiting formula. Ethan stood near the wall, not sitting, not hovering. He had removed his coat. Several people recognized him, or thought they did. Sophie saw the glances. She hated the way his presence made the room feel divided. People like him usually pass through places like this as donors, not as patients. The receptionist slid a clipboard back toward Sophie. Your insurance is inactive. Sophie's heart sank. No, it shouldn't be. I filed the paperwork after I lost my job. The receptionist gave the exhausted smile of someone who had delivered bad news too many times. It says coverage ended last month. That's not possible, Sophie said, though of course it was possible. Everything was possible when life had decided to remove the floor one board at a time. You can self-pay. The visit starts at $185, not including tests or medication. Sophie looked down at Lily. $185. Her mind emptied. Ethan stepped forward. I can't. No, Sophie said sharply. Several people looked over. Her face burned again, but this time anger rose with the shame. No, you don't get to just keep paying for things. Ethan stopped. I understand. No, you don't. Her voice shook. You think this is kindness. Maybe it is. But to me, every time someone pays, something gets taken. A choice. A boundary. A piece of my pride. I don't know you. I know. And I don't want to owe you. You won't. That's what people with money always say. His face tightened. The receptionist looked between them. Lily began crying again, hot, and miserable. Sophie's anger cracked under the sound. She turned away, blinking hard, trying to think. Credit card maxed. Checking nearly empty. Mara might have $40, maybe less. Her brother had stopped answering months ago after too many requests he could not meet. Ethan spoke very quietly. Let me pay the clinic directly. Not as a favor. As a debt. Sophie looked at him. His expression had changed. The calm was still there, but underneath it was something rawer. What debt? He looked at the form in her hand. Former employer, Grayson. Property services. Then he looked at her. I own the parent company. The waiting room noise seemed to fall away. Sophie stared at him. No, she said. Westridge Holdings acquired Grayson last year. Her fingers tightened around the clipboard. Your company? Yes. The anger came slowly at first, then all at once. Your company canceled our contracts, Sophie said. Your company replaced night staff with a subcontractor paying $2 less an hour. Your company cut the health plan for part-time cleaners. Ethan's jaw tightened. Sophie laughed once, but there was no humor in it. I lost my job 3 weeks after Lily's pediatrician ordered a different formula. I lost insurance because HR said I didn't meet the new hours threshold. I applied for assistance, but everything takes time. And you? Her voice broke. She looked around the waiting room, suddenly aware of strangers listening, and lowered her voice. You stood behind me in a grocery store and paid $3 like you were rescuing me from bad luck. Ethan closed his eyes briefly. Sophie, no, she stepped back. Don't say my name like we know each other. The receptionist cleared her throat softly. Ma'am, do you still want to check in? Lily coughed hard enough that Sophie's anger became useless. Yes, she said. She reached for her wallet. Ethan did not move. That was the first thing he did right. He let her try. Her card declined. The sound was quiet, but Sophie felt it like a slap. The receptionist looked pained. Sophie stood completely still. Then Ethan placed his card on the counter. Put it under Westridge Holdings community medical account, he said, voice controlled. Do not bill Ms. Bennett. Sophie turned on him. I said no. And your daughter needs to be seen. His voice was still low, but something in it had cracked too. You can hate me after the doctor checks her lungs. She hated that he was right. She hated that being poor meant moral choices were always made under pressure. She hated him most of all because his company had been part of the pressure. Lily was seen 20 minutes later. Bronchiolitis, the doctor said. Not severe enough for hospitalization, but serious enough too. Watch closely. Fever control. Fluids. Monitor breathing. Return immediately if she struggled to breathe, refused bottles, or became lethargic. Medication. Saline drops. A nebulizer treatment in the clinic. More forms. More waiting. More instructions Sophie tried to absorb through exhaustion. Ethan stayed outside the exam room until Sophie opened the door and found him standing in the hallway, tie loosened, eyes fixed on the vending machine as if it had personally accused him of something. She'll be okay, he asked. The question came too quickly to be polite. Sophie shifted Lily against her shoulder. The doctor thinks so. Relief moved across his face before he could hide it. Sophie saw it. She did not want to care. At the pharmacy counter inside the clinic, there was another problem. The medication was not expensive by wealthy standards, but it was expensive enough. Ethan paid before Sophie could stop him. This time she was too tired to argue in public. But when they got back to the car, she stood beside the open door and said, I want a receipt. He looked at her. For everything, she said. The clinic, the medicine, the groceries. I'll repay it when I can. You don't have to. Yes, she snapped. I do. He nodded slowly. All right. I'll give you the receipts. And after you drive us home, you leave. Yes. No coming inside. No notebook. No resources. No strange rich man guilt project. A faint wince touched his face at the accuracy of it. Yes, he said again. The drive to her apartment was quiet. Sophie gave sure directions. Ethan followed them without question. Lily slept against her chest, breathing easier after the treatment, her tiny body heavy with exhaustion. Sophie watched the city pass through the rain-streaked window. Laundromats, pawn shops, a bus shelter with a cracked panel, a bakery closing for the night, a luxury development rising behind scaffolding where an old block of rent-controlled apartments had once stood. Westridge Heights, the sign read. Sophie turned her face away. At her building, Ethan parked at the curb. It was a narrow brick building above a bakery, with a front door that stuck when the weather was damp and a radiator system that knocked loudly at night. Sophie lifted Lily carefully, then reached for the grocery bag. Ethan handed it to her. For a moment, neither of them moved. I didn't know, he said. Sophie looked at him through the open car door. That's what makes it worse. He absorbed that without defending himself. She carried Lily inside. True to his word, Ethan did not follow. Upstairs, the apartment smelled faintly of baby lotion, old heat, and the lentil soup Sophie had stretched across 3 meals. She laid Lily in the crib, checking her breathing twice before removing her coat. Then she sat on the edge of the couch and stared at nothing. Her phone buzzed. Mara, you okay? Sophie, home. Lily has bronchiolitis, but okay. Mara, do you need anything? Sophie looked toward the kitchen counter where the formula sat. Sophie, no? Thank you. Then another message appeared from an unknown number. Ethan Westridge, these are the receipts. I'll send proper copies tomorrow. I'm sorry. Attached were photos. Grocery, $22.85 clinic. $185 medication. $38.47. Sophie stared at the numbers, then at the words. I'm sorry. She did not reply. The next morning began badly. Lily woke at 4:12 a.m. coughing. Sophie held her upright in the rocking chair until dawn, counting breaths the way the doctor had shown her. At 6:30, she made coffee and forgot to drink it. By 7:15, it was cold. At 8:02, the daycare called to say Lily could not return until fever-free for 24 hours. At 8:10, Sophie remembered she had a job interview at a hotel laundry service at 11. She called to reschedule. The manager sounded irritated. We have a lot of applicants, Ms. Bennett. I understand. My daughter is sick. A pause. We'll keep your application on file. That meant no. Sophie hung up and sat very still. Lily gurgled weakly from the playmat, reaching for a soft cloth elephant with one hand. Sophie crawled over and lay beside her on the floor. I'm trying, she whispered. I promise I'm trying. At 9:30, someone knocked. Sophie froze. Not a neighbor's knock. Not Mara's quick double tap. A careful knock. She looked through the peephole. Ethan stood in the hallway holding nothing. No flowers. No bags. No dramatic gesture. Just himself, looking as if he had not slept much either. Sophie opened the door with the chain still on. I said not to come back. I know. And yet, I came to bring documents. That sounds worse. His mouth tightened faintly. It probably is. She almost closed the door. He said, I reviewed the Grayson transition files. Sophie went still. Your department was flagged for reduction because a consultant claimed the night cleaning staff could be outsourced without affecting employee stability. I signed the approval. There it was. Not fate. Not bad luck. A signature. A man in a high office approving a document that became Sophie counting coins under fluorescent lights. She stared at him through the narrow gap. Congratulations. You found the exact page where my life fell apart. His face paled slightly. I also found internal objections, he said. One HR manager warned that several workers would lose health eligibility. The warning was buried in an appendix. But still there. Yes. And you didn't read it. No, the honesty made her angrier. Because excuses were easier to hate. Sophie closed her eyes. Lily coughed from inside. Ethan's gaze flicked toward the sound, but he did not ask to come in. I can't undo what happened, he said. But I can investigate the process. Reinstate benefits where we violated transition agreements. Offer back pay if we misclassified hours. This isn't charity. It's liability and accountability. Sophie opened her eyes. Why tell me? Because you deserve to know I'm not here because I'm kind. His voice lowered. I'm here because I was careless. The hallway seemed to narrow around them. Sophie hated him less for saying that. Not forgave. Less hated. There were others, she said. I know. No, you don't. You know spreadsheets. There was Carla who skipped insulin twice after losing coverage. Ben who moved into his cousin's garage with 3 kids. Denise who worked with pneumonia because she couldn't afford urgent care. Ethan swallowed. Names, she said. Do your investigation with names, not numbers. He nodded. Will you write them down? No, he accepted that too. Then Sophie surprised herself. I'll ask them if they want to speak to you. That's different. Something like respect moved across his face. All right. And I'm not your redemption project. No, if you use Lily in some corporate guilt story, I'll destroy you. For the first time, a faint trace of warmth crossed his expression, gone almost immediately. I believe you. Sophie closed the door, but she did not feel finished. Over the next 3 days, Ethan did not appear at her door again. Instead, practical things happened. An email arrived from a Westridge legal coordinator offering a voluntary review meeting for former Grayson employees affected by the transition. Sophie ignored it until Carla called her crying because she had received the same email and thought it was a scam. Then Ben called. Then Denise. By Friday evening, Sophie had become the person everyone asked whether this was real. She hated that role. She also accepted it, because someone had to make sure the company did not soften the truth into polite language. Lily's fever broke on Saturday morning. Sophie cried in the bathroom where Lily could not see her. Not dramatic crying. Not cinematic. Just silent, exhausted tears while sitting on the closed toilet lid, one hand pressed over her mouth because the walls were thin and she did not want Mara to hear. That afternoon, Ethan called. She considered not answering. Then she did. Yes. I'm downstairs, he said. I won't come up. Good. I have the full benefit review paperwork. And the clinic receipt copies. Sophie looked at Lily, who was asleep in her crib with one fist curled beside her cheek. I'll come down. She put on her coat over yesterday's sweater and carried the baby monitor with her to Mara's apartment. Mara opened the door before Sophie knocked. I've got her. Go. You don't even know what I'm asking. You're asking me to watch Lily while you go yell at the rich man downstairs. Sophie almost smiled. Probably. Downstairs, Ethan stood beside his car, holding a plain folder. He looked out of place against the wet brick and bakery steam, but less untouchable than before. There were shadows under his eyes. Sophie took the folder. He did not let go immediately. Not to control it. Just hesitation. Then he released it. We found errors, he said. How many? Enough. That's not an answer. 37 employees likely lost benefits improperly. 12 may be eligible for back pay. 5 cases are urgent because of medical issues. Sophie's throat tightened. Carla. Yes, he said. Her coverage should not have lapsed. Sophie looked away. Traffic passed in a wet rush. Is this going public? She asked. If the employees want it to. Privately, we can resolve faster. Publicly, it may force broader changes. She looked back at him sharply. Don't put that on us. You choose public when it benefits you and private when it protects you. He flinched. She was glad. Then ashamed that she was glad. You're right, he said. Stop saying that. I don't know what else to say. Try saying what you're afraid of. The question seemed to catch him without armor. For several seconds, he was silent. Then he looked toward the bakery window, where warm light pooled over trays of bread Sophie could smell, but rarely bought fresh. My sister died after delaying treatment, he said. She had money. Insurance. Access. She still delayed because she didn't want to inconvenience anyone. Because she was raising my nephew alone and thought she could manage one more day. His jaw tightened. By the time she called me, it was too late. Sophie's anger shifted, complicated by unwilling empathy. I'm sorry. He nodded, but the movement looked painful. I built systems after that, he said. Funds. Clinics. Programs. Things that looked good in annual reports. And then I signed a document that took medical access away from people cleaning our buildings at night. Sophie held the folder tighter. So when you saw Lily, I saw my sister, he said. And then I saw what I had done. Not directly, maybe, but close enough that hiding behind distance felt obscene. Sophie looked at him for a long moment. There was no romance in that confession. No clean heroism. Only guilt. But guilt, at least, was real. Helping me won't bring her back, Sophie said. I know. It won't make you good. I know. And I don't know if I trust you. You shouldn't yet. That answer stayed with her. A week later, Sophie attended the employee meeting because Carla begged her to come. It was held in a community center room with folding chairs, bad coffee, and a flickering projector. Ethan was there, but not at the front like a savior. He sat at the side while a legal advocate explained options in plain language. Sophie noticed that he had hired an outside nonprofit attorney to advise the workers, not the company. That mattered. Not enough to erase anything, but enough to notice. When Carla stood and asked whether accepting back pay meant signing away the right to sue, Ethan's company lawyer began to answer. Ethan interrupted. Let Ms. Alvarez answer independently. The nonprofit attorney nodded and explained. Sophie watched Ethan's face as workers described what the cuts had cost them. A missed prescription. A lost apartment. A child pulled from daycare. A credit score ruined. He did not look away. That mattered too. After the meeting, Sophie found him in the hallway near a vending machine. You did one thing right, she said. He looked at her. Only one. Don't get ambitious. A faint smile touched his face, but it did not become charm. He seemed to know charm would insult her. How is Lily? Better. I'm glad. Silence settled between them. Not comfortable, but not hostile. Then Sophie said, I have an interview Monday. Medical billing assistant. Part-time. The hours might work. That's good. I didn't get it because of you. I didn't think you did. She studied him. But if they call Westridge for a reference, I want the truth. Not pity. You'll get the truth. What do you think the truth is? He considered carefully. That you are precise under pressure. Defensive for good reason. Unwilling to be managed. And probably the only person in that room who scared my legal team. Sophie looked away before he could see the reluctant amusement on her face. That's a terrible reference. It's an accurate one. On Monday, Sophie went to the interview wearing her cleanest blouse under a coat with a missing button. Mara watched Lily. The bus was late. Sophie arrived sweating despite the cold, with her resume slightly bent from being clutched too tightly. The clinic manager, a woman named Mrs. Patel, asked practical questions. Could Sophie handle patient accounts? Yes. Could she manage difficult calls? Yes. Could she learn insurance coding? Yes. Why the gap in employment? Sophie hesitated, then told the truth without apologizing. My daughter was sick. I lost coverage after a corporate transition. I've spent the last few weeks learning more about medical billing than I ever wanted to know. Mrs. Patel looked at her for a long moment, then said, that may actually help. Sophie got the job. Not a dream job. Not a life transformation. Part-time, modest pay, probationary period. But steady. With training. With a path. She called Mara first. Then, after staring at her phone for almost a full minute, she texted Ethan. I got the job. His reply came 2 minutes later. You earned it. Sophie read that twice. Then put the phone down. Winter settled in slowly. Lily recovered, though every cough still made Sophie's body tense before her mind caught up. The back pay process began. Carla got her insulin covered retroactively. Ben received enough to catch up on 2 bills. Denise cried when she found out her hospital charge would be reviewed. Sophie received a check too. It was not huge, but it was enough to pay rent. Enough to buy formula without counting coins for 1 month. Enough that she stood in the grocery aisle holding the can and cried quietly, facing the shelves so no one would notice. Ethan did not disappear. He also did not push. Sometimes he texted updates about the employee review. Sometimes Sophie replied with corrections because his language still sounded corporate. He learned to write people instead of affected individuals. She learned that he listened when corrected, though not always gracefully. Once, he sent a proposed public statement. She called him immediately. This is terrible. A pause. Good evening to you too. You wrote, some workers experienced unintended hardship. They did. No. Your company caused harm. Say that. Silence. Then, that will have legal implications. There he is, Sophie said. He exhaled slowly. Sophie. No, don't Sophie me. You asked for honesty. That sentence is cowardice wearing a suit. He was quiet long enough that she thought he might hang up. Then he said, you're right. Stop saying that and fix it. The final statement said, Westridge Holdings made decisions that caused harm to workers and families during the Grayson transition. We are accountable for repairing that harm. Sophie read it 3 times. Then she cried again, angry at herself for caring. In late December, Lily turned 8 months old. There was no party, just a small candle stuck into a muffin Sophie bought from the bakery downstairs. Mara came over with a knitted hat. Carla brought secondhand baby books. Ben brought a toy truck Lily was too young for, but immediately loved chewing on. Ethan sent nothing. Sophie noticed, then hated that she noticed. At 8 p.m., after everyone left and Lily was asleep, there was a knock. Sophie opened the door. Ethan stood there holding a small paper bag from the bakery. No gift, he said quickly. Just bread. Mara said you forget dinner when people come over. Sophie leaned against the doorframe. Mara talks too much. She cares about you. She also has terrible boundaries. Possibly. Sophie looked at the bag. You asked her what I needed? No. She told me what you wouldn't ask for. That was annoyingly different. Sophie took the bread. Thank you. He nodded. She should have closed the door. Instead, she said, do you want coffee? He looked surprised. So long as it's not an inconvenience. It's instant, and probably bad. Then it'll be familiar. She raised an eyebrow. He looked almost embarrassed. My sister made terrible instant coffee. Sophie stepped aside. He entered carefully, as if the apartment were a place requiring permission from every object in it. He had been here before in the earlier version of her life, the one where he had almost walked in too easily. This time felt different because Sophie had chosen it. The apartment was small and cluttered. Baby clothes drying on a rack near the radiator. Bills stacked under a magnet shaped like a strawberry. A chipped mug beside the sink. A folded clinic uniform over the chair. Ethan looked at none of it with pity. Good. Sophie made coffee. They sat at the kitchen table. For a while, they spoke of ordinary things. Lily's new habit of throwing socks. Sophie's training at the clinic. Ethan's nephew, Noah, who was 9 and apparently hated math, but loved building elaborate cardboard cities. Then Sophie asked, "Do you see him often?" Ethan's face changed. "Not as often as I should." "Why?" "My brother-in-law blames me." "For your sister?" "For not answering her call the first time." Sophie went still. Ethan looked down at his coffee. "I was in a board meeting. She called twice. I texted that I'd call after. By then, she had driven herself to the hospital and collapsed in the parking lot." Sophie's chest tightened. "That's why you answered the situation with Lily like it was an emergency." "Yes." "You weren't saving us," she said softly. "You were answering her." His eyes lifted. The silence became very full. "I think so," he said. Sophie did not comfort him. Not because she was cruel, but because some grief deserved not to be rushed into reassurance. "After a while," she said, "my ex used to say I made everything harder because I wouldn't just accept help." Ethan's gaze sharpened slightly. "What happened to him?" "He left when Lily was 3 months old. Said fatherhood made him feel trapped. Before that, he spent months making me feel like needing anything was a character flaw." Her voice remained even, which somehow made it worse. "So when people help me, I hear his voice asking what it'll cost." Ethan's expression darkened. "I'm sorry. So am I." Lily stirred in the crib, making a small sound. Sophie rose immediately. Ethan stayed seated. She appreciated that. When she returned, he had not touched his coffee. "She's fine," Sophie said. "Just dreaming." He nodded. At the door, when he left, he said, "Thank you for letting me in." Sophie looked at him for a long moment. "Don't make me regret it." "I'll try not to." "That's not very reassuring." "It's honest." She accepted that. January came cold and hard. Sophie worked 3 days a week at the clinic and picked up weekend shifts filing records. Lily started daycare again, though Sophie still flinched every time the phone rang during work hours. Bills did not vanish. Exhaustion did not magically lift. Some nights, she ate toast standing over the sink because sitting down felt like admitting how tired she was. But something had shifted. Not solved. Shifted. She had names to call. A job badge. A payment plan. A little space between disaster and total collapse. Ethan continued changing too, though not neatly. He made mistakes. At one employee advisory meeting, he suggested a childcare stipend structure that sounded generous until Sophie pointed out it required workers to pay up front and wait for reimbursement. "People who need childcare help usually don't have $600 lying around," she said. He rubbed a hand over his face. "Right. You really didn't know that?" "I knew it abstractly." Abstract doesn't feed anyone. The next version paid providers directly. Another time, he offered Sophie a full-time administrative position at Westridge. She stared at him as if he had insulted her. "No, it has benefits. It also has you." He looked taken aback. Sophie sighed. "I don't mean that cruelly. I mean I need something that's mine. Not something people can say I got because you felt guilty." He nodded, slower this time. "You're right." She pointed at him. "That phrase is losing value." He almost smiled. Noted. Their relationship, if it could be called that, grew in pauses. In practical conversations. In disagreements that did not end with someone leaving. In the strange intimacy of being seen at one's worst and still being treated as someone capable. One evening in February, Lily developed another fever. Not as high, not as frightening, but Sophie's hands shook anyway. She called the nurse line, gave fluids, checked breathing, did everything correctly. Then, at 11:48 p.m., she texted Ethan. "I know she's probably okay. I'm just scared." His response came quickly. "Do you want me to call or just stay on text?" Sophie stared at the message. "Just stay?" So he did. For 2 hours. He did not tell her not to worry. He did not say everything happens for a reason. He did not try to fix what could not be fixed through a phone. He simply stayed. At 2:03 a.m., Sophie wrote, "Fever down." Ethan replied, "Breathe now." She did. Spring arrived slowly, with dirty snow melting along curbs and sunlight returning to the apartment in thin gold lines. Lily began pulling herself up on the couch. Sophie started laughing more, though often with surprise, as if the sound had returned from a place she had forgotten. The Westridge settlement concluded publicly. 37 employees compensated. Benefits restored where possible. A worker hardship fund created with employee oversight, not corporate branding. Policy changes implemented across subcontractor transitions. It was imperfect, but real. At the final meeting, Carla hugged Sophie so hard she nearly knocked the breath out of her. "You did this," Carla whispered. Sophie shook her head. "We did." Across the room, Ethan watched but did not approach. Later, outside the community center, Sophie found him standing beneath a tree just beginning to bud. "You didn't give a speech," she said. "No one needed one from me." "Good." He looked at her. "Are you disappointed?" "No," she paused. "I'm relieved." Something gentle passed between them. Not romance exactly. Not yet. Something quieter and more dangerous. Trust beginning to consider the possibility of existing. Ethan walked her to the bus stop. The evening was cool, the pavement damp from earlier rain. Sophie held Lily on her hip, the baby's hand tangled in her hair. At the stop, Lily reached suddenly toward Ethan. Sophie froze. Ethan froze too. Lily made an impatient sound, fingers opening and closing. "She wants your watch," Sophie said. Ethan looked at his wrist, then back at Lily. Sensible. It's shiny." He carefully unclasped it and let Lily touch the face while Sophie held her securely. Lily slapped it with great seriousness. For some reason, Sophie's throat tightened. Ethan noticed, but said nothing. The bus appeared in the distance. Sophie should have taken Lily back. Instead, she said, "You can visit Sunday. For lunch." Ethan looked at her. "With Mara there," Sophie added quickly. "And Carla might stop by? It's not a date." "I understand. Don't wear a suit." A faint smile. "I'll do my best. And don't bring anything expensive. Bread." She sighed. "Fine. Bread." The bus pulled up. Sophie stepped on, paid her fare, and found a seat near the window. Ethan stood on the sidewalk, hands in his coat pockets, watching without the old composure. He looked uncertain, human. Lily pressed her palm against the glass. Ethan lifted one hand. As the bus pulled away, Sophie felt the familiar ache in her chest, but it was different now. Not gone. Not healed. Just less alone. Sunday lunch was awkward. Mara interrogated Ethan about tenant rights, tax shelters, and whether rich people actually used the word summer as a verb. Carla arrived with soup. Lily threw mashed carrots onto Ethan's sleeve. He looked at the stain, then at Sophie. "I was warned not to wear a suit," he said. Sophie laughed before she could stop herself. Everyone heard it. The room softened. Later, after Mara and Carla left, Sophie stood at the sink washing dishes while Ethan stacked them beside her. Lily napped in the crib, one sock missing. "You don't have to do that," Sophie said. "I know. You always say that. I'm trying to learn the difference between helping and taking over." She glanced at him. "And it's harder than it should be. At least you know." He handed her a plate. Their fingers brushed. Neither of them moved for a second. Then Sophie took the plate and washed it. Not because she felt nothing. Because she felt enough to be careful. When Ethan left that afternoon, he paused at the door. "Sophie." She looked up. "I care about you," he said quietly. "Both of you. I'm not asking you to do anything with that. I just didn't want to hide it behind paperwork anymore." Her heart gave one painful, frightened beat. She wanted to step back. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to say something sharp enough to restore distance. Instead, she said the truest thing. "I'm not ready." He nodded. "I know. And I don't know when I will be. I'm not asking for a timeline." "She comes first," Sophie said, looking toward Lily's crib. "She should. And I come with damage." "So do I." That almost undid her. She looked away. "Good night, Ethan." "Good night, Sophie." After he left, the apartment felt quiet, but not abandoned. Sophie stood by the window and watched him walk down the street in the fading light. No driver waiting, no dramatic departure, just a man carrying breadcrumbs on his sleeve and grief in his shoulders. Lily stirred softly behind her. Sophie turned back to her daughter. The bills were still there. The world was still hard. Healing had not arrived like a miracle. Trust had not erased memory. Love, if it ever came, would not be simple, and forgiveness would not be a single beautiful moment. But the next morning, Sophie would wake up, make coffee, take Lily to daycare, go to work, and keep building a life that belonged to her. And somewhere across the city, Ethan Westridge would have to keep becoming the kind of man who did not only notice suffering when it stood in front of him at a checkout line. That was not a fairy tale. It was smaller than that. Harder. More honest. A woman learning that accepting help did not have to mean surrendering herself. A man learning that guilt was useless unless it became accountability. A child sleeping safely through the night because two damaged adults had finally stopped pretending survival was meant to be done alone. Outside, the city moved on, indifferent and bright. Inside the small apartment above the bakery, Sophie lifted Lily into her arms and held her close. For the first time in a long while, the silence did not feel empty. It felt like the beginning of room being made. For breath, for trust, for something tender that had not yet asked to be named.